the voice of humanity.
History often changes not through great battles, but through whispered words in a palace room. The stone walls of the Tower of London and the gilded ceilings of Westminster Palace silently witnessed the intrigues and passions of the 16th century. During that era, Henry VIII, who sat on England's throne, symbolized both power and desire, as well as stubbornness. His story is not merely about a king changing his faith for love, it is a political revolution that forever altered the destiny of a nation. When Henry VIII ascended the throne, he was a young, handsome king, devoted to the Catholic faith. His father, Henry VII, had erased the devastating scars of the Wars of the Roses, filled the royal treasury, and left a strong kingdom to his son. At first, Henry was loyal to Rome, even authoring a work against Martin Luther's ideas that earned him the title Fidei Defensor, Defender of the Faith, from the Pope. Yet this loyalty would soon dissolve in the shadow of personal desires and political ambitions. Henry's first wife was Catherine of Aragon. She had initially married Henry's elder brother Arthur, but after Arthur's untimely death, she wed Henry with special papal dispensation. This marriage strengthened the ties between England and Spain. What seemed like a harmonious union at first, however, grew into a major problem for the crown over the years. The Tudor dynasty was still new, and securing the future without a male heir was impossible. Catherine had multiple pregnancies, most ending in stillbirth or infant death. Their only surviving child was Mary Tudor, who would later be known as Bloody Mary. Henry began to see the lack of a male heir as a divine sign. The Old Testament verse, "If a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing," haunted his mind as proof that God had cursed this marriage. Yet behind this religious interpretation lay a passion blossoming within the palace corridors. That passion was Anne Boleyn, a young, intelligent, and dazzling lady-in-waiting. Educated in Paris and noted for her grace, Anne stood apart from her sister, Mary Boleyn, who had been Henry's mistress before. Anne's demand was clear: she wanted to be queen. For Henry, this was both an emotional and political temptation. But for that to happen, he had to annul his marriage to Catherine. In 1527, Henry petitioned Pope Clement VII for annulment, arguing that the marriage had been invalid from the start since Catherine had been his brother's wife. Yet this was not just a religious issue, but a matter entangled in international politics. Catherine was the aunt of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor and one of the most powerful rulers of the time. Charles pressured the Pope heavily to deny the annulment. The Pope's refusal struck a heavy blow to Henry's pride and concept of sovereignty. From that moment on, Henry resolved not to recognize Rome's authority. In 1534, through the Act of Supremacy passed by Parliament, he declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. This move severed ties with the Catholic world and gave birth to the Anglican Church. England's religious leader was now not the Pope, but the King himself. This decision was not only to marry Anne Boleyn. Henry also made a significant economic move. He dissolved the Catholic monasteries and seized their wealth and lands. This enormous fortune filled the royal treasury and was distributed to loyal nobles, strengthening the king's political support. The economic and political power of the Church in England was broken. In 1533, Henry married Anne Boleyn. While England welcomed its new queen, the marriage was a scandal across Europe. Anne soon became pregnant and gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth would grow up to become one of history's greatest monarchs. But at the time, Henry was still disappointed. His search for a male heir was not over. Anne's position at court became increasingly precarious. Henry's affections drifted to other women, and Anne found herself besieged by political enemies. In 1536, shocking accusations were made against Anne Boleyn: adultery, treason, and even incest with her own brother, George Boleyn. These charges are widely regarded by historians as among the darkest political fabrications in history. Contemporary documents strongly suggest these allegations were fabricated, the incest claim in particular being a tool to discredit her and justify her execution. But in the treacherous atmosphere of the court, even a rumor could be a death sentence. Anne Boleyn was found guilty after a swift trial and was executed in the Tower of London. She was succeeded by Jane Seymour, Henry's new favorite. Jane would bear Henry the long-awaited male heir, Edward, though she died shortly after childbirth. Henry continued his turbulent cycle of love, loss, and power. Henry VIII's religious shift did more than sever England's ties with the Roman Catholic Church. It fundamentally transformed the country's political structure, economy, and future foreign policy. Yet this move also plunged England into centuries of religious conflict. The battles between Catholics and Protestants under successive monarchs led to civil wars, exile, and bloody executions. Even today, the monarch of England is also the head of the Church of England. This legacy is the result of Henry VIII's decisions, driven by ambition, passion, and political cunning. His story remains an unforgettable example of how a ruler's personal desires can reshape a nation's destiny, and how love and intrigue can become an extraordinary force in history. When Elizabeth was only 3 years old, her mother Anne Boleyn was executed. Raised amidst palace intrigues, she was kept distant from the throne and sometimes even questioned in her legitimacy. Yet this loneliness and exclusion sharpened her intellect and forged a strong will. She pursued a rigorous education, becoming one of her era's most accomplished rulers in language, politics, and history. Elizabeth's story is one of ambition, caution, and determination, a legend of a queen who rose from her mother's shadow to lead England into its golden age. But that is another story and the subject of our next video.